This is Shu Hirata's Let's Talk Japanese Fight Sports with Charlie Jouet from sogokaku.com. Let's begin. Hey, good evening, Charlie.
Hey, Shu, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing well.
It's for us to be in the same time zone, right?
Exactly.
Busy week?
Very busy. Been very busy.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about the first topic, which is everybody's talking about, one championship. You know?
Yeah.
And let's go back to maybe June 23rd. One championship held a press conference to announce the Japan show, right?
Correct.
And that was the first show was back in 2019, I believe, October, and took about 4 years and 3 months for them to come back and did the second show last year at the site of Super Arena. And now they announced this new show. Now, besides
wasn't there a show last year at Ariake?
Was it Ariake Arena?
It was Ariake, yeah.
Ariake Arena, yeah. Okay, so but they had a good turnout, right? But besides the fight cards of this next Japan show, I think the fans' attention was about, how, one championship is financed from the 2023 was revealed, right, by the John Nash, who can basically say that he's like an expert in reporting a financial status of one championship.
Yeah, so it's kind of become an annual tradition where around this time of year, when one championship's financials get announced, that everyone starts freaking out because the losses seem to continue to grow.
Right.
I think I saw that their accumulated losses since their inception now are at over $500 million.
Yeah, 560 or 570 or whatever, right.
And they've still yet to turn a profit. So, I mean, it's been close to 14 years now. So people are starting to wonder. I think the highlights of the article to me were that the Qatar fund is actually kind of embarrassed, supposedly, according to the sources, about investing in one championship. And that the only reason they're investing in it anymore is in a way to kind of protect their previous investments. Right,
because if you finish it, if you dump it and that's it, you will never get that return on your investment. And so they would have to figure out a way to, try to at least make a money back or, make some profit on their end. But anyway, so by looking at Mr. Nash's article, right? Or the podcast. I'm not going to go through everything because some of the parts are his paid portions, right? So I, recommend our, listeners to go log into his page on Substack and check him out. But I guess should cover 2 points that I thought was kind of interesting. That like you say, that basically one raised about $536 million from the start to end of 2023, spend 444. So to consider the burn rate, if you do the math, how long it's going to last. And I guess they moved their operations to Thailand and do most of their shows in Thailand too. So obviously the cost of event promotion, marketing, etc. is cheaper there than doing shows in Singapore, China, or Japan, right? So
plus I think they announced more layoffs as well.
Yes, and they're using many Muay Thai fighters, which tends to be cheaper than MMA fighters, and this Nash's article was very interesting in a sense. He also pointed out that, I think their revenue went up by 25%, but they still lost money because they spent like $59.8 million on marketing.
Well, I was looking more into that, so I looked at some other articles. What's interesting is they don't know the exact numbers because this isn't reported. But what one championship does is they'll consider what are called non-consideration or non-money as income. So when someone does promotional work for them, but it's included in the service, they count that as that person having paid them money, and they include that in their revenue. So the revenue is very shaky because we don't know how much of it is actually money. If you remember, a couple years ago, they reported, I think, that they had a $400 million income. But when you looked at it, it was just one championships companies selling its IP rights to another one championship company, and not for money. It was just all on paper, nothing actually, no cash was. I mean, I think some cash was transferred, but it was just them shuffling their own money back and forth.
Right. So it's not a really actual cash revenue, right? I mean, it's basically some of the things are barters, and some of the things are like promotional spots on broadcasters or stream platforms and that kind of stuff. So it's really not exactly a cash coming in.
Also, one of the big things that concerned me was, do you see what they reported ticket revenue was for last year?
Oh, I know, like 144,000 or something like that, right?
I don't know if that includes their U.S. show, but because that might be
a
different group
company. Over like 40 shows. They did the 40 shows, right?
So 140,000 in ticket sales is insane.
Yeah, it's like very, very, like, it's almost less than embarrassing, because when you really think about it, divided by what, 45 plus shows, like, so it's like what, like $5,000 per show, whatever. I mean, that is right. So
if you think about it, that means if that includes the show in Colorado and the Tokyo show, that means almost all of those tickets were free.
Almost, right?
That nobody paid for tickets for those shows.
Right. Yeah. So it's now, but my question is this: this $59.8 million they spend on so-called marketing. So where did that money go? Right. I mean, that's not for the fighters. It's not for the event productions. It's not for marketing. It's not really. I mean, event marketing. It's not really. I don't really see too many increase in the advertising spots, all kinds of stuff. So
I will say, what I read was the way that they use the free marketing to include their income. They also include that same number as a marketing expense. So in an effort to make it look like they're making more money, they also have to make it look like they're losing more money. And it's it's legal, but it's also very confusing just to look at, because how much of that 59 million was actually spent and how much of that was just added there so they could also include it in the income.
But I always have a question on this. You know how they keep raising money, right? Even in 2023, I mean, after 2020, so it's 2024, supposedly Qatar gave them like $40 million again, right? Like they
in October
investment. So I think they have to spend the money on whoever the, like an analyst or high level investment person, whatever it is, to get that investment, right? So they must be spending money on that part of the thing. That should be part of the marketing, right? Yeah. And actually, I listened to that Nash's podcast, and he also pointed out that he thinks they're spending money to get metrics. Obviously, like social medias and all these numbers. So we always heard the rumors that they spend actually money to get these numbers, and
yeah, it's true. I mean, we don't know how they're spending their money. All I know is that, from what I read, that 59 million, large portion of that might just be fake, because they're counting money that they would have spent on marketing but they received for free. But then they're also counting that as income. And also, it's very strange, because if you go to the event, I've been to an event, if you go to their events, it all feels strange. And it's very reflective of the promotion itself. Like, something just doesn't seem right. And I think people have had their something feels weird about one championship the entire time it's existed. Especially at the final.
Right. I mean, like little things like, how all these photographers, supposedly media, like taking all the fighters, walking into the venue, and we found out that they're hiring some amateur guys to just show up with the camera, and same thing with the metrics. There's always a doubt about that, because some of the, let's say, for example, fights they uploaded on YouTube, if they even have like 200K viewers, but they have only 2 comments, kind of thing. A lot of things just don't really adds up and doesn't make sense.
Well, I would not doubt that they spend a bunch of money on bots. Also, remember, I think it was around 2022 when Bloody Elbow first started releasing those deep dives into One Championship's financials. And that was right around the time where One Championship, I think, my opinion, I don't know if it's true or not, in response to those articles, reincorporated in the Cayman Islands.
Yes.
They're able to they don't have to report as much as they do when they were incorporated in Singapore.
Yeah, but they went to Cayman Islands and they came back to Singapore. So, maybe
they're still domiciled in the Cayman Islands.
Oh, okay.
But it's very strange because they all announced they announced it as part of their process of trying to make a IPO in the US.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see that happening. And now, aren't there rumors that Amazon's not going to redo the deal? That because Stamp Fairtex got injured, they canceled the New America show. And they're not doing it again until like August of 2026.
If they can do it, right?
Right. So, it's not a good look.
Yeah.
Plus, if you look at their cards, the number of actual MMA fights they're doing is also very low.
Yeah, exactly. You've seen a lot of fighters more publicly said that don't sign with the one, or it's time for him to leave. So he's been asking for a release and blah, blah, blah kind of stuff. So, but, I think it's been documented over almost 10 years that they do sit a lot of fighters on the deck. And now with the number of MMA fights are completely decreasing, obviously, right? They won't be able to make all the fighters on the roster active, so it'll be much nicer for them to just release them.
Well, I remember I watched one of their Friday night fights because Chihiro Sawada was on it. And I think she was the only MMA fight on the entire card.
Right.
And then you have, I forget his name, there's that one fighter that sued them to get released because they weren't offering him fights.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard other fighters, I'm not going to say the names, but I've heard fighters in private tell me that signing with One Championship was a giant mistake, that they promise you big paychecks, then they never offer you fights, and things like that.
Right. But still, many kickboxers in Japan are still talking about hoping to go to One Championship. They think they can make a better money there, and they have a top Muay Thai fighters, which is true.
No, it's true. If they go to One Championship has somehow become maybe the best kickboxing organization in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the pay is so low in Japan that
in terms of kickboxing, right? Yes. Right. So as a kickboxing world in Japan, the pay is super low. That's why all the fighters it's fair to say all of them make a majority of income through sponsorships.
Right.
Not actually a fight purse. So compared to that, the one is a good stage for them. It's a good place for them to fight, earn money, and test their skills against the top fighters in the world.
Right.
Right. But then it's so funny that former K1 producer Carlos Kikuta posted on X, how one is in trouble and blah blah blah, and Takeru responded by saying that criticizing other promotions will also
bring
down cause a bad image on the entire fight sports and blah blah blah. Of course he's still with One Championship, obviously. So So I think right now it's even in Japan, I think a lot of fighters and coaches and everyone is finally kind of realizing that maybe it's not going to last that long, or they're going to be a big change in the next couple of years kind of stuff, Maybe they'll scale down to a Muay Thai promotion in Thailand,
Well, I saw that they've moved their base of production to Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
All of their events happen now in Thailand.
Yes.
And Chatri was fishing for the royal family to compliment him on helping promote the culture of Muay Thai in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So it really does feel like they're transitioning into being a Muay Thai / kickboxing promotion that runs out of Thailand.
But here's what it is, though. From an investor's point of view, pour so much money into this promotion, and now thinking, they're going to be a big MMA promotion, maybe competitive to UFC kind of thing, because that was the whole, play, right?
Right.
I'm sure they were looking for some buyer, who believes that, numbers and everything else, but not anymore. And if they're going to do a so-called Muay Thai promotion, and even though it's the best in the world, top of the world, do you think that's going to satisfy investors? Because there's a huge shift in the direction of the company, and you would never dream about UFC selling to somebody for $4 billion kind of stuff in terms of Muay Thai, right? So
no, and I also read that I'm not 100% familiar, but Qatar was kind of competing with Saudi Arabia, and when the Saudi Arabia had like the Apex shows, they had like their own fight island during COVID. That Qatar was hoping to do the same thing with one championship and build a special arena there to have more events from one championship in the region. And none of that has really materialized. And that's some of the reason that I saw the Qatar Airlines and other people pulled out of investing in one championship.
Right.
So maybe they think they haven't seen the return on their investment.
And they will never see the big return on investment that they were hoping if they're going to shift to the so-called only the top best Muay Thai kickboxing promotions in the world. Because that's a different kind of label we were looking at,
Right.
Yeah. So now, but not only one championship, though. There's also John Nash came up with another article talking about how number of MMA fights are decreasing. Like rapidly, talking about, and when you look at the last 10 years or so, there's a good 50% decrease in number of fights.
And the landscape, it just seems like the number of mid-level promotions has drastically decreased.
Yes. And basically, even in Fight Pass, we're really looking at what, like LFA, CFFC, and maybe Fury, right? In terms of American feeder shows.
Right.
And what else? I mean, the Titan seems like it's done, right? I mean, they haven't put a show.
Even when you look at the other shows, though, like you look at like Combate Global, which is doing a good thing on YouTube, but their cards are 5 fights, 7 fights. I mean, they're all just switching. Invicta FC is doing the same thing.
Right.
5-fight cards.
Yes. Invicta has postponed the June show and seems like they're not doing the show in July. So, it's a 2 shows planned show that's being pushed back. So, and we all know what happened to GFL.
Yeah.
And this article is very interesting that Russia, Brazil, America, everywhere they're decreasing in the number of fights, but except Japan. Japan is the only one that's still there, keep maintaining, what it is. And so, I mean, what do you think what's going to happen in the next couple of years? I mean, I know UFC is just going to dominate, but besides that, I mean, are they even going to have a competitor in their own country, meaning like it's PFL? Is going to do anything about this? Or
I mean, isn't that kind of the UFC's goal, to become America's version of the NFL for MMA?
Yeah, of course, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it's looking like. The era, because now the era of these small regional promotions just really seems to be drying up as more and more, I think COVID wiped a bunch of them out. And I think as people switch to the streaming-based models, they just don't have a way to make money.
No. And if they got cut by Fight Pass, I think many of them might even, this will slow them down, right? I mean, probably decrease the number of events,
Plus, I mean, it seems like, isn't karate combat like booming right now?
I wouldn't call it booming.
I mean, it's doing quite well considered to the other promotions.
Yeah, but like for example, like they were doing the July 2-day night shows, but they just announced it like last week, so they're not really doing any promotions. They're not really selling tickets.
Right.
Here's what it is, and like you pointed out about the ticket sales of 1-2. All right, sure, 144,000 sounds very, very low, and sure, if they do shows in Thailand or some country, the currency is much lower. Sure, but still, that's super low, and I think that's actually a clear indication if they're really like there's a demand on the market for that brand. And obviously, no, right? And Karate Combat, same thing. It's not like they're filling up a big arena. I mean, although they have this new venue in Miami done by, I think, Crypto. I think it's the Bong Arena or something like that. They supposedly they're using that arena, but I don't know how many tickets they're selling. Yeah. So I mean, sure. I mean, a lot of people thinks that right now media rights bring in more money. Sure, of course, streaming and everything else. But if you can't sell tickets, and the chances are you're not going to get a good streaming deal because your brand sucks or just not even established yet,
That's kind of the thing that the U.S. hasn't gone through yet, though, is that Japan is so used to dealing with the collapse of pride that like promotions like Pancrase, Shuto, and Deep learned how to scrape by on nothing. They learned the lessons. Like, if you look back, Smack Girl was this big women's promotion, but they accumulated a bunch of debt and fell to pieces. So then Deep Jewels emerged, and they're very strict. We do 4 shows a year. We do them on these months. We will not grow past our means. We will do these specific small venues. And just that's kind of how Japan is in general. A lot of the minor promotions have adapted and found ways to survive through the hard times.
Right.
Whereas in the U.S., that never happened. And this is probably the first time it's happening. Because even during the cockfighting thing, that really only affected the UFC's pay-per-views and things. A lot of the local shows were still doing quite well.
Right. And in terms of Deep that you just mentioned, they're back to like in the Pride days. Now they're riding a coattail of popularity rising. And I tell you this on the record, I mean, they pay fighters better than some of the title fights in LFA. You know what I mean? So I mean, here's what it is. I can't name names yet, but recently one Japanese fighter got released from the UFC. And he's not my management, but I've been talking to him. And my advice to him is like, you got to go back and fight in Japan and get all the stack up W's. And if you get called back from the UFC, sure, take it. But, chances are you're not going to get that call for a while. So why not fight as much as you can and try to get the RIZIN, right? I mean, that's where, you can make money. I mean, if you can't fight for UFC, then your second option or purpose should be to try to make a living from fighting and earn money, right? So, and then, for them, when you really think about it, if you're only fighting US feeder shows, you're not going to support family with that kind of money. No. You have to get a full-time job, whatever that is. And so what? Then what's
the US feeder shows? You're not even going to make enough money to pay for your air travel to and from the show from Japan.
Right. So if you're a Polish fighter, you go to KSW. If you're a Czech fighter, you go to Octagon MMA. And if you're Japanese, go to RIZIN. And those are 3 countries, when you really think about it, that maybe you can make a living by purely just fighting MMA fights. Right. Which means if you're out of UFC, then you got to get a job. I've always tell fighters that until you clear the first contract and resign to the second full fight deal, you really shouldn't quit job, period. Yeah. So we'll see, what happens. But, again, current status of WMMA is not looking good, Yeah,
because, I mean, I was looking at the numbers. I think so far RIZIN has had 1 super atomweight fight this year. And then they've had a couple of strawweight fights. And that's only because they like Machi, and they're giving Machi fights. And I think they have.
Let's talk about this super RIZIN, because they are female fights there, right? I mean, I want to talk about this one. Yeah, go ahead. They have a.
Well, they have. So they're going to put 2 more super atomweight fights on this. They have Moedi Suda fighting Noelle, and then Seika Izawa fighting someone she shouldn't be fighting. I mean, not going to do a lot to boost the division's public appeal.
But here's this is Suda, right?
I'm more interested in this Moedi Suda Noelle fight.
Right. I mean, she just beat Ayaka. So here's what it is in terms of RIZIN marketing brain point of view, that if she does really well in this fight, it doesn't matter who the opponent is. I mean, no. I mean, if she does well and finish the opponents, if it's not a boring fight, an exciting fight, that might, light the fire on the women division. You know what I mean? Because Machi, of course, they like it, and they have Izawa, who's very good. So they will need a couple more characters, talents.
I'm going to call this fight. This is their attempt to make their new Kana Asakura, and they've tried that several times before and failed. But look, with Sakura and Eru Takabayashi, But with this one, they're doing it again because Moetti Suda is still very young. She's, I think, 20 or 21. And Noelle is very young. Noelle, for being very young, has kind of been pushed before she even went pro. She was in those breaking down. She was in those Rising Confession videos with Ayaka Hamasaki because she was at AACC. And so she's been kind of well built by her management company. So she has a following. And the winner of this fight has potential to go quite far, especially considering Suda just beat Ayaka Hamasaki and she submitted her, which is crazy.
Right. So young Suda, young, already popular, kind of established Machi, and there's a definite champ Izawa. So they need a couple more talents, Then they might still bring in fighters from the West instead of just only on Korea or Asia,
Well, Machi fought in Sapporo and won, but she took Salt to a unanimous decision. And let's be honest, Salt is a fun person, but Saudi Oshima beat her in a minute when they fought in Sapporo.
Sure.
And Machi not finishing her, to me, that was a fight where she should have finished her. And Machi struggled against Siwoo Park, who is an atomweight.
And here's what it is. You just mentioned two more key names, Oshima and Seri Park.
Yeah.
Those are two fighters. Like we mentioned how Invicta is slowing down. So even though Oshima is under Invicta contract, she probably can fight in Rising or Deep, right? So she could be in the mix. And Seri Park is another fighter who she's dying to go to UFC, but it seems like the matchmaker is not interested.
Yeah, she's got to go to Rising.
Exactly. I don't understand. Somebody has to explain to her that it's not going to happen.
And the other one I want to mention is I don't know what her plans are, but if Machi insists on staying at 52 kilograms, they need to bring Arisa Matsuda to Rising and have her rematch Machi on the big stage. Because
I hope they do.
That's everything they need to be a big star. She was a former baseball player. She was a very good baseball player. She won on the road to UFC. She was the former Deep champion.
Well, here you said that one key word again. She won in the road to UFC. Most of the Japanese fighters would be like, okay, I want to go back to that stage again. And maybe I shouldn't fight for Rising.
No.
A lot of fighters still feels or think that way.
No,
she shouldn't be, right?
I'm saying what she should do is use her win on road to UFC. Her win, by the way, over a big name from China who defeated Miki Matono twice. So a very solid win. She needs to leverage that to get on Rising.
Right.
She shouldn't go back to a lower level show or try to wait a year and get back on the road to UFC. She should go straight to Rising.
Yeah, here's the problem about some of the young Japanese fighters. Once you fight for road to UFC, and even though you lose in the first round, they enjoy the experience and they saw the half a dream, So a lot of fighters tend to think that, okay, it's better to not take a loss, of course. So let's be picky about the fight. So that will result in maybe doing only one fight per year or not even one, right? Then on top of that, a lot of fighters in Japan think like once I fight for Rising, maybe I might not be able to go to UFC. They get this kind of weird philosophy in their head. No. And Rising is in a way a convenient promotion that if you're going to fight for them for first time, more than likely they'll give you a one fight contract. You know what I mean? They were not going to insist on tie you down immediately right off the bat. Meaning that you could go there and fight and go to the road to UFC next year too still. Yeah. But it's a Japanese thing. A lot of fighters believe that that's maybe a little bit rude to Rising too. You know what I mean?
No. Well, so my thing is you've already won at road to UFC. You don't need to go back to road to UFC. Like you've already got the best possible result you can get from fighting at the road to UFC. You went there, you won, you beat the best Chinese fighter that was in the tournament last year.
Right.
Go to Rising, get a couple wins. Even if you lose at Rising, at least you're losing at the highest level.
Here's what it is. I've been talking to a lot of coaches in Japan about that too. A lot of fighters, just because they don't take a loss before road to UFC, end up fighting only once a year. Now, compared to that, a fighters went to Rising and fight 3 times a year, lost once, won twice. That fighter will end up being actually stronger because they're getting more experiences. And let's say if you drop one, I don't think it's too that big of a deal, especially if you lose to a good fighter.
Right.
And if you come back with another win, it'll be fine. So I mean, it's like, so that's why right now many coaches in Japan are shifting towards that thinking now, that you shouldn't really only insist on road to UFC.
Right.
Like you said, that she should be using that as the platform to get into the better promotion, which is RIZIN in Japan, and just do a casual one fight, contract. And if she wins one or two, then she can have two choices to go to the road to UFC or get a better contract to RIZIN, right?
See, if I was her, I would be leaning into the fact that they like Machi, that Machi's popular. I'm coming off to road to UFC, and I've beaten Machi to get that rematch, and then to get popular on the biggest stage in Japan, and then get more
mentioned key names there too. Besides the Matsuda, you also mentioned Motono.
Exactly.
Sure, she lost, but she's also solid in strawweight or super atom. She could go down. So right there, they have a pretty good cast of characters there, right? I mean, in terms of
you start to get to the annoying politics of Japanese MMA, because there are enough women for RIZIN to make two very solid divisions. The problem is getting them from the promotions and the gyms, and I think that might be more difficult than we think.
And also, actually, even the fighter too. Right now in Japan, RIZIN is doing very well. I mean, like even with the fight card coming up on Super RIZIN 4, I mean, it's not exactly the best of the best, right? I mean, Shadoraf is no longer fighting. Sho Kleber against Mikuru. Mikuru basically saved the show, but the point is, it's not like a really top of the card, but still they're selling out shows and having 20,000 people coming to the press conference and stuff like that. So it's, even Shingo told me it's amazing. They're on the roll now, So a lot of fighters in Japan now actually really prefer to fight for RIZIN.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that resulted in not exactly a top tier fighters from Japan end up in road to UFC.
Well, it shows the road to UFC that everyone except for what's the one guy got massacred this year. Just,
I know. Yeah. We'll talk about the semi-final, but let's do the preview on this RIZIN, Super RIZIN 4. I mean, besides Mikuru, Koike, I was surprised Mikuru took this fight.
Mm-hmm.
This is a hard fight for him, but he's willing to take a risk.
Yeah.
I think he's basically saving the promotion pretty much right now.
Exactly. I mean, also, he's kind of I don't think there's a way he loses popularity if he loses this fight, because of the fact that he's stepping up and he's coming off of a big win.
Right.
Yeah, this doesn't really do that much damage to him if he loses, but if he wins, it's seen as like a revenge match, overcoming a challenge.
It's funny that you pointed out, when he was fighting Chihiro, as a manager of Ren, I mean, like, if you get lost to Chihiro, maybe no more Ren versus Mikuru 2, meaning big payday loss, right? But he beat Suzuki, so now he's facing Kleber. It's funny, Kleber is such a former champion, and he's recognized as like one of the best on the featherweight division in RIZIN. So even though he loses to Kleber, the grudge between Mikuru and Ren will still go on. You know what I mean? Because he beat Chihiro already. So, and I'm comfortable about this fight.
Me too.
And I think it's going to be a very tough fight for Mikuru,
But I think you agree when I was saying, I don't think there's a lot of negative for him taking this fight.
No. Even though he gets smoked, he'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's just like Keramo fight. How he loses, but he came back. Even the Yama too, right? So.
Yep.
Now this one, like I said that publicly, Naoki's last fight on RIZIN contract.
Yes.
So we'll see what he says after this fight. Of course, he has to win it. If he wins, And you mentioned Izawa. This is a fight for her to win. They had to make her act.
Her opponent, I mean, I'm not trying to be insulting, can barely call herself a professional fighter with the periods of inactivity she has between fights.
Yeah, that's because she, RIZIN really wanted to bring in Reina to fight Izawa. Yeah, and Reina got injured and doesn't know when she can come back. It's still unclear, so they had to make her active. And I'm sure they tried to make her active in deep, but she probably wanted to fight RIZIN, not deep.
Right.
So they brought this Korean girl in, and they even flew her in for a press conference. Yeah. So that's the way they market.
Yeah.
Now, all right. So let me ask you this. Now let's talk about this flyweight Grand Prix. You know how they added Torres and Soya in the last minute, made the tournament to 10-man tournament instead of 8. What do you think about that one?
I'm okay with them making the tournament bigger. Yeah. The weird thing to me was the whole one of the winners will not advance, and the fans will vote on which one doesn't advance.
Well, I think this is what's going to happen. Of course, we need all the details, but still the details are undecided in terms of how they choose. But they already mentioned to you that it's going to be voted by some media experts, whatever that is, right? So I think they're going to end up getting influencers to medias to experts, like maybe 50 of them, and vote.
Yeah.
Now, when this idea came up, when Sakakibara said that, you can kind of imagine that Shingo and Mr. Sasahara will say, what are you going to do with this one guy, right? I mean, like five fighters winning on the first round. It was student tournament. We're going to do the seed. How are we going to make this fair, right? So it's still very undecided in the sense that what is their plan for the fighter who doesn't make it to the semifinal?
Well, I think I saw that they said that they were going to do they're going to be the reserve match.
Yeah, there was a couple talk. They're the reserve match, right? That's the one talk. Or they'll give this fighter who didn't make it to the semifinal immediate challenge rights next year.
Well,
and kind of stuff.
And if that's the case, why wouldn't you want to be the reserve fighter? Skip all of that.
Exactly right. So you don't want to do that, but you also have to think about the fact that people could miss weight.
Yes.
Right. I mean, Montoya.
Injuries can happen.
Right. It has happened before, and this has been a while. Last time he fought 125, right? So that should be the legitimate concern, right? So So I'm telling you, I think. Again, I think this is another scheme that, what's so funny? I was told by Shingo that Sakakibara said this, that they announced the Flyweight Grand Prix, good momentum going, but that's it. There's nothing more. So we need to add, which kind of makes sense, but, and, we've seen the tournament that never finished before, right, in Strike Force and stuff, but I don't think we've ever seen a tournament like this.
Where there's one fighter that doesn't know if they're going to make it through or not, even if they win.
Exactly, because that means that you're going to lose a opportunity to get that 200K. Yeah. 20 million yen, which is what, like 170K, whatever that is, which is not a small change, right? So, yeah.
Well, it also seems. I was also kind of confused by I know they want to make it exciting and let the fighters pick the matches and have that whole ceremony.
Yeah.
But I think having Hiroya fight Montoya in the opening round is kind of crazy.
Montoya chose that, right? That was his choice.
I know, but I feel like if I was Rising, I'd want to give Hiroya the best chance of making it through as hard as possible.
You know what? I thought, the MVP of that Destiny Rules, drawing was Ogi Kubo for him to step in to fight against Torres. Yeah. That made everything very interesting because we have a couple more interesting, matchup left. And I think Shinryu against Asen is a very interesting matchup, both wrestlers, right?
Right.
And in a way, Hiroya against Montoya is kind of interesting in a way. It's a super veteran versus a super rookie.
Right.
So who's
both trained in the US.
Right, yeah. So,
where's
Hiroya training now?
What?
Where's Hiroya training in the US?
I don't know. He's with Billy Bigelow in the US somewhere.
Okay. All right. So it's not a known big team.
Right.
Well, that's why I thought, in a way, so this Flyweight Grand Prix, everything became much more interesting now.
I wanted to bring up a comment. You mentioned that we talked briefly about the Shaid dropout.
Mm-hmm.
I think that reveals a bigger problem that Rising is having. The reason their announced reason for saying he's not fighting is because they wanted him to fight Karamov, who I think injured his hands in the fight.
Right.
And then they went to two other guys that also fought on the same card. and said one of them was injured and one of them couldn't make weight in time for the tournament. And you've talked about it till you were blue in the face about how they need to be better at creating challengers. It's kind of crazy to me that they were waiting to announce Shahid's opponent based off the winners of the previous event a month earlier.
They do that a lot, Charlie. That's their culture. I've heard so many times they tell me, "Oh, okay, let's wait till what happens on next show." You know what I mean? They would like to do that, and but even the UFC too, these days they expect fighters to get ready in 6 weeks, 7 weeks notice. So from their point of view,
I understand like the A plan is Karamov fights him, but you should have like a B plan that's a guy who's ready.
Right.
You have a guy that's ready that's not on that event.
Right, but again, maybe they don't have a plan, good B or C or D, because
they did. They had B and C, but they were also on the same card.
So it's taking a risk. I'm talking about another plan besides those fighters who has a risk of getting injured.
Right.
Yeah,
so or not because they're doing very well, but everything still seems to be running kind of based off of that same model as when they weren't doing well. And I'd like to see a little more planning now that they have the means to do that.
I'll tell you this. You know how from the very first Pride shows in the U.S., how they announced the cards in last minute, and they were criticized, you should have announced it 2 months prior, posters all over the place, the market, blah, blah, blah. They're like, no, that's our style. It should be fine. That kind of attitude, style, I would say, still exists to this day. And I'll tell you something very interesting. I kept telling the people at RIZIN that, some of their short videos they do it on X, matchmaking stuff. It's kind of interesting, right? Like a comedy. So you should put more like English subtitles, right? Put all my shorts all over the place, do it. Like you should do more and more, put English subtitles, And Shingo agrees, and he's been saying that, but he told me this once, they're so stubborn. Their thinking is almost like a Japanese animation, famous animation. So Godzilla, whatever that is, they'll keep doing their own stuff till people outside Japan will recognize you. So it's the same thing.
Yeah,
it's the same attitude towards the matchmaking too.
I'm okay if they announce it late. Just plan it behind the scenes quicker or something.
No, I think they kind of knew that if those two fighters end up not making weight or got injured, whatever that is, then they'll probably push him to the September show.
Right, but
the big show.
The timing of it just seemed bad because Sakakibara just recently made that big stink about how Shahid's staying and RIZIN, how they're going to build stuff around him, and he's not going to the UFC. Then they announce his big participation in the show, and then they say they can't find an opponent for him. It just makes it look unprofessional.
Oh, I know. I mean, here's what it is. I think he revealed that he has 2 fights left, right? So, in other words, only 2 more. That's it. He might just go, right? So, and it's not like he's a big ticket mover. Right. So then I think it would be smarter for RIZIN to try to set up a fighter who could be at least a rival or competitor against him. So maybe, can beat him or, the type of stuff. So, within the contract and term they have, I think they're pushing the fight for 2 months. It's not that bad, but sure, it doesn't look good, like you said, Yeah, but I think it's okay. The point of view.
Fine. I was just laughing because I thought if you were paying attention, just looked really like they didn't know what they were doing.
Right. And also, what do you think about this heavyweight tournament?
I mean, my note when I was preparing for this was, is this still going on? Does anybody care?
It's so funny that I saw some of the YouTube thing that RIZIN put up, and there's Shingo and Sasahara was talking to journalists and stuff like that. And Shingo kept saying that the heavyweight tournament is giving him a nightmare, So, you got to find something, But also, when you really look at it, they did use some of the heavyweight fighters earlier in the RIZIN era who ended up being PFL champ or ended up being UFC kind of stuff. So, I think, in terms of...
He pointed this out before, though. That was back when Shingo, I think, went and picked the fighters he wanted.
Yes.
And this time, the promotions just sent fighters.
Yeah, I mean, they wanted to, it's like I get it. It's like a world Grand Prix kind of thing. So they wanted to get some representative from each promotions, So they approached the promoters instead of looking for fighter and talking to the management. Because I did suggest that some of our clients into the heavyweight tournament, but they were like, no, this one we prefer to bring in some promotions champion or representative for promotion. So, So, again, that's like their style. It's been like that, though, right? When you really think about it from the Pride days.
Well, I mean, I think to their credit, I think the fights in Sapporo were better than the previous heavyweight tournament fights.
All right, let's talk about Sapporo show because I want to talk about this one too. Now, this one is going to be a review.
I think those heavyweight fights were better, but the initial fights left such a negative taste in everyone's mouth. Even Sakakibara commented about how disappointed he was.
Right.
I think the heavyweight tournament's kind of dead on arrival.
Sure. Now, on Hokkaido show, what do you think about this main event? Kelamov against Kimura.
I think the real story, to be honest, is all about Kimura because even though he lost, he got in bad positions and never got submitted. Karamov is kind of this monster in RIZIN's ranks.
Sure.
And Kimura's this young guy. This is the first loss of his career, but I mean, he didn't look bad.
No, but also I think it revealed that Keramov's conditioning, stamina, and cardio is in question. If you can't storm through the first round and finish the fight, he significantly slowed down.
Right.
And so then, I won't name names, but some of the matchmaker of the US feeder show was watching this with me, and he was like, he's not going to be able to survive in UFC. He's not a UFC caliber. kind of stuff, Therefore, okay.
A lot of the Japanese audience, they kind of group the dominant foreigners together as the same person. It's really important to remember, like Souza is not Koike. They are very different levels of grappling skills.
Yes.
And Karamov is not the same as like Shahid or Musayev. He's
exactly.
his own fighter, and I don't think he's as good as those guys, but he's still very good.
Still,
yeah.
But again, what he was saying is that this guy, of course, is gung-ho UFC fan. Kimura, he still won't consider as a good-looking rookie because it's against Karamov, and all he did was takedown defense and never really had a chance to win that fight.
Right.
But I think Kimura is an interesting talent, right? I mean, he still had 5 fights, 6 fights. And he only fight one round till this last fight, right? It's the first time.
Right, so it's the first time going the distance.
Right.
And I think this will be, if he's going to be a good fighter, this is going to be a very good experience for him.
Oh yeah, of course. So I would love to see him coming back more and take good fights. I think it's going to be a very interesting talent. And this is the fighter I would like to talk about. What do you think? What do you thought about Yamato's performance?
Well, I mean, I'll just say it the other way. I thought Poirier had a flawless victory.
Oh yeah.
I mean, caught the kick and absolutely destroyed him.
It's so funny, how after the fight he was complaining. Even before the fight, he was saying I'm prepared to fight much bigger guys. And after the fight, Yamato was not complaining, but he was saying it was a clear weight difference. I have to even think about if I should go on with MMA and blah blah blah. Now, I used to manage him. He's not anymore, and I sent him to Bang Tao in Thailand, right? And I'll tell you this now on the record that she should have gone there alone, but instead both of her parents went there with him. And I'm talking about full time. Daddy closed his little chiropractic clinic he had. So they both went there. And mommy cooked, did the laundry and everything. So it was a whole family moved. And obviously both parents not working. So putting a lot of burden on Yamato that he has to earn money. And I'll tell you on the record, he was getting better money in PFL than UFC. But, he never won, right? So it's not like he earned big money. Yeah. But the point is this, how his father always coached him from age 3, whatever. And he was featured in Japanese television when he was 8 years old. He was a big boy who was training to be a, MMA fighter and blah, blah, blah. And still the father has to coach him everywhere he goes. So I had to explain to Bangtail coaches and get a special, treatment in a way that if it's not classes, if it's nothing happening, They can use the mat and they can do their own training. And what's so funny was this. One day I get a complaint says like, Yamato is not attending all the BJJ classes, only the last half. Meaning, first half of the class is usually a repetition, right? Drill. And last half is sort of like a sparring. And Yamato only joins sparring part, not the drills. And I'm like, so what's he doing during the drills? And he's hanging himself upside down, meaning it's a father's training where he hang himself upside down from the tree or bar or whatever they have. And then he just hang himself down, upside down, and staring at the drills. When the sparring comes, he joins. You can do that, right? I mean,
unbelievable, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like that with him. And so he ended up not being able to train Bangtan anymore because he wouldn't come to the classes the coaches want, He kind of didn't want to attend the wrestling class, which I think he absolutely needed. So now he ended up going to the different gym in Thailand, ended up not being able to train there because of the father or whatever that is. Now he's training at the only kickboxing small Muay Thai gym. So I don't think he has been doing any MMA training.
Well, I mean, he got absolutely murdered. And this is the performance Hodier needed too, because Hodier kind of came into RIZIN with a lot of fanfare.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, he hasn't been that active these past couple of years. And
he was injured, I think, right?
Right. He was injured. And then he didn't really have that great of results. But based off of this win, I think it made a big kind of announcement to the division and the RIZIN fans.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully he has another fight soon so he can build off of that and keep the momentum going. But flawless victory.
Hodier is a solid, good fighter. And, Nishita, without solid MMA training, and I always thought he's a bantamweight, Right. And it's funny that after the last PFL fight, I convinced both father and son, the Yamato, to go down to 145 at least, Let's take a step. So I suggested, all right, we're going down to 145. Immediately, I get a reply from his mom, and say, no, that's not possible. Who's going to step into the cage and fight? Not you,
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Sounds like he has a lot of issues going on behind the scenes then.
Yeah, exactly. So I wish Yamato leaves his parents at this point. He should actually, again, I shouldn't comment so much. It's other family issue, right? So, he has his own way. But I'm telling you, he's a talented fighter. He's still young, right?
Yeah.
So he can still bounce back. But if he still stays there with parents and training with daddy, it's just going to be a waste of time. And it'll be too much pressure for him, too much burden on his shoulder for paying for his parents and everything else. I'm sure the money he made in RIZIN is not going to have to pay more than a couple months, right? So,
one more performance like this, and do you think he even comes back to RIZIN?
Even after this performance, Sakakiba may not bring him back. In a way, some of the journalists in Japan said this: the RIZIN is sometimes tougher than Dana White's Contender Series. Because if you fight once, if you don't look good, Sakakiba will never bring you back. He doesn't like it, It will take you a long time to bring him back, kind of stuff, right? So,
gotta go prove yourself again.
Right. So now, other than these two fights, any other fights in Hokkaido landmark that you wanna?
Let me see. Scroll down.
Yeah, Sasuke.
We're seeing people that were slated to fight Shadiev. We already kind of talked about the Machi fight as well.
Yes.
She had a dominant win, but I thought she got the finish.
Koro
lost.
Koro Izawa's
husband.
Right.
It's like 4 losses in a row for him. So I feel like it's almost like domestic abuse allowing him to keep fighting on RIZIN.
Again, this is another matchmaking, right? I wonder why he got this fight, right? They probably couldn't find the formidable opponent and figures, all right, Izawa's husband. Let's put him in,
It's not good.
But here's what it is, though. Let's talk about this one. Tatsuya Ando. Mm-hmm. He was the participant of the first, a road to UFC Japan, whatever. You remember that? They had the tournament?
Right.
And
one where they had the actual Ultimate Fighter.
Exactly. So even though he's natural 135, he was competing 145. From back then, I thought he was really talented fighter. Talking about very talented, you know. And guy like him or Sasuke and those fighters, they sort of kind of insisted on UFC all the time. So they always avoided a Japanese big promotion. They never said yes to the offer from RIZIN and everything else. But finally they came in. And he had a good win on this one.
Yeah.
Now, this guy, Tatsuya, if he trains, if he disciplines himself, I think he will be a threat to Naoki, I think. You know, he's that good. You know, from the days when he was with Shonan, even Shonan was telling me he's very good. But, you know, problem is his personal life.
Right. But, I mean, this was a good win for him. Get the first round submission. I mean, in Japan, whenever you beat a foreign opponent, it always looks good because I mean, most people don't know who you beat, but they'll assume that they were a dominant fighter.
Right. So I hope he comes back because he'll be one of the guys who do well in the rising bantamweight division.
Right.
So I sort of heard about his personal life. So if I was like a Gibara, I'll make him active. So if you give him fights every 3 months, he don't have a time to screw around. You know what I mean? Kind of stuff. No, I'm telling you, I'll tell you this funny episode. It was like a year ago. I took my kids to playground right there in Manhattan, right? And I saw this one Japanese guy with a daughter. And he had a big time like Yakuza tattoo all over the place, but he's wearing tank top. But obviously you can tell, all right, this guy used to be maybe a tattoo or some kind of rap artist, whatever, right? Like a delinquent type. Right. And he's Japanese, so I started talking to him. And he's like, have you ever heard of a fighter named Ando Tatsuya? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, we were good friends. Stuff like that. You know, like, so even in New York, something like that happens, you know?
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah, it's funny.
How old is he? I see someone saying that his age is a bit of concern.
Yeah, exactly. He's not exactly too young anymore. Again, it was like 10 years ago, right? When they had that UFC, and he was peaking at the time. And, you know, but again, he's a good fighter, so I hope, you know.
But even if you're an older fighter, if you're still got some skills, RIZIN finds a way, they can find a way to use you. Because they don't have a deep enough roster to not have those
exactly. Right. And even though you lose, you put up a good performance, they bring you up, bring you back.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know. You know what? This is one thing I want to tell you this before we go to the next subject. Koro, I have an interesting episode too. In New York, there is a so-called a hostess spot, Japanese style. You know, you sit in and sit next to girls, you know. Maybe 10 years ago, you know, I went with my friends. And, you know, a girl sat next to me. I don't remember nada about that. About a year later, I get an email from this young girl from Facebook. And, do you remember me? You know, I was, you know, hostess. And my friend, he's a professional fighter. His name is Koro. You know, like, it's funny, right? Something like that happens, you know. But anyway, so, you know, back then I suggested actually maybe he should fight in bantamweight. Because, you know, he was all right then, you know, but he kept his 145 and he ended up fighting for a big promotion at the end of the career, right? Almost. So, and he achieved what he wanted to achieve, I think.
Yeah.
In that sense, yeah. All right. So, quickly, we want to talk about this one. The only Japanese survived on Road to UFC show.
Yeah, I thought it was the interesting thing about Nakamura was that he has no fights in deep pancrase or shuto.
No. And here's what it is. And when you look at his typology page and stuff, it's very interesting in the sense he had like 3-4 pro fights and fought in this Abema tournament.
Yeah.
It was 3 minutes rounds, so maybe they classify as AMI. So he fought pro and went AMI and won that tournament. And that tournament was to get a right to fight for RIZIN. So he won that tournament and he was going to fight for RIZIN. And he was like 5-1 at that time, but RIZIN gave him Doubtback. So he ended up saying no, you know, which is actually rare for Japanese. You really don't say no to any offers, and you know, and especially in the RIZIN, you consider it as an opportunity. And even though if it's against Doubtback, you know, like, all right, you know, I'm still gonna take it. But no, he didn't. I guess maybe because of Yushin Okami is his coach, so that's his advice. You know,
well, this was interesting because he fought mostly like X Fight and Pound Storm, which is that old thing that you Okami and Takaya,
right? Yeah,
Takaya were doing together. So it's nice to see that thing's actually bearing fruit and producing some new fighters.
Right. But this also tells that Road to UFC really couldn't get a top fighters from Deep Shoot or Pancras now because they're all looking at UFC.
Well, the problem is they keep getting fighters that are the same fighters applying for it every year.
Right.
I think the same Japanese fighters just keep applying to it.
Yeah, exactly. But this year, what happened was that they decided to pick up new guys, meaning they didn't use any return fighters,
Right.
So, so in that sense, so he was one of the new names. But here's what it is, though. Not to take anything away from him. He's a good fighter, good talent, but I'm telling you, he's not a champion caliber in RIZIN. So what is the chance it's in the UFC, right? No, I really think right now, since the Japan has the big show and gives you the opportunity to fight tough guys and big stage, fighters should go there. And fight 2 or 3 times, or 4 times, whatever that is. If you don't win 3, lost 1, or whatever that is, do that. And if you get an opportunity, just apply for this, right? I mean, because it's not like they're full of applicants they really like, that it's so hard to get in. Really, reality is that they're really scrounging looking for fighters in the last minute. So
his next fight's in August, right?
August 22nd. Then we can talk about the next one, which is the Japanese fighters in August shows. Yeah. Right? Who do we have? I think Ninya Nakamura and Taira first, August 2nd. I think Nakamura fighting Nathan Fletcher, Taira fighting Amir Albazi. And August 9th, we got Kazama, my client, fighting Elijah Smith. And 16th, Kaya Sakura fighting Tim Elliott. And yes?
I mean, they're all fighting that month. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's fighting. And also Ray Tsuruya, who's going to be fighting our client, Namjarugaru Turmedemberel from Mongolia. And Namjarugaru was supposed to fight Jesus Aguilar and Notch UFC in September. But they changed the plan because they added that show, right, on Friday night on 22nd.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so I guess they're trying to push that market,
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the biggest one is clearly the Kaya Sakura Tim Elliott fight.
Oh, of course.
And if he wins that fight, nobody cares that he lost the title fight. If he loses that fight,
especially nobody in Japan would care. Right. And for sure, UNX is going to score big viewership on this fight. It's just because of Kai. But other side of the coin is, what if he loses again?
Yeah.
And I'm sure the UFC is going to use, up to the end of his, contract. He's not going to release it because he's going to score big viewership. But, I hope he wins. I hope, In
the future, they could they might put him on like an Australia or like a China show just because anything close to Japan.
But again, if he gets good viewership, because I tell you this right now, even though top-notch card in the UFC, they're not really scoring big viewership in Japan. You know how that works.
Well,
I think Kaya Sakura himself will flip everything.
You can't tell me that there's a lot of people watching these Apex shows.
No, can be, and just because of the time difference, and also because they don't know the fighters.
Did I read that one of the reasons that Amazon is dumping one championship is because they're making a push to get UFC on Amazon?
I heard that because they're doubling the Dana White's Contender Series, and that's why BJJ is also a new content for Fight Pass, so they no longer wants to pay so many promoters. It only makes sense. Why would pay promoters if they can double the Contender Series shows and get paid?
Yeah.
Right. So.
Because I feel like that Amazon was moving away from kind of what they're calling experimental products and moving more to established brands.
I think so, because and it's not like they're really putting a lot of sources into MMA. It's not like they're investing on that sports, right? So
no.
And it's kind of obvious maybe it doesn't worth to invest on MMA if it's not a UFC.
Well, I think that is what one championship's legacy may be, is that it's not worth investing in anything but the UFC.
Yeah, exactly, especially in North American market.
I mean, PFL looked promising, but it seems to be falling apart at the moment.
Yeah, it's too bad. And it looks like Francis Ngannou wants to go back to UFC, right?
Yeah, but I kind of get the impression that Dana White hates him. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, but for big fights, money makes you do the things that you don't want to do sometimes.
Yeah, but it'd be kind of interesting to see what Francis's financial demands would be.
That would be true, and I hope they would deal with him in a lot. So as John Jones, if he's coming back. So as Connor, if they were really going to do that White House show, whatever that is.
Well, that's going to be crazy if that happens.
I'm not going to comment on that politics at this point. But anyway, so we're going to see a lot of Japanese fighters in UFC in August.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be at the August 9th show with Kazama now. So let's talk about this kid, Fuji TV employee, Yoshiya Uzatsuyo, who was an okay kickboxer, and
he fights for Rise, right?
Yeah, he went to Rise, and he fought before he fought for UFC, and he got a call from his employer, Fuji Television, says that you better not fight.
You mean Rising?
Rising, yeah. And he's got a call from
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the thing was in Japan, having like a second side gig is really frowned upon.
Yeah, actually, you're not allowed, supposed to.
Yeah,
I think it's a discrimination in a sense, because it's like I know some company salaryman, they end up writing novel. It's okay, right? You can't do this.
It's funny that it's banned because every CEO I know in Japan secretly formed their company while they were working at another company,
right?
And only left when their company was like on its feet, making money, and able to support their new lifestyle. So everybody does it that I know. It's just nobody talks about it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But in this instance, I think I read that people were like, "Oh, did you tell Fuji Television about your fight?" And he just kind of said, "Oh, I've talked to some of my seniors, but I haven't asked them for permission." And he got in trouble because he just kind of ignored them and did it anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but the news hit the market before the fight, and saying the Fuji TV informed him that it's going to be a severe penalty, official warning and blah, blah, blah. But he still went and fight, and he's still working for Fuji TV.
Didn't he also say that he was like fighting to restore Fuji Television's reputation after the recent scandal?
Yeah, his fighting is not going to restore Fuji TV, the rest.
But that's what he said, I think.
Right. But here's the reason. Like I told you, I found out that Uzatsuyo Yoshiya, he is actually a relative of the chairman of Kikkoman Soy Sauce, Yuzaburo Mogi. And that's his relative. And that's what he got into the president. Yeah.
Didn't Sekibara kind of say, like, he comes from a rich family, so I'm going to support his fighting career?
Yes. It used to be called Noda Shoyu, but it's called Kikkoman now, because this fortune teller says that you should change the name to Kikkoman. So it became Kikkoman, and it's a huge name, as everybody knows, right? I mean,
the only soy sauce brand I know.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Probably the biggest soy sauce brand, And he's very close to the chairman, relatives. So he's probably not going to get any penalty. And he's asking for Kota Miura for his next fight. I mean,
if I was Miura, I'd take it. This is kind of a perfect opponent for him.
Right. Exactly. And, it's so funny that still, Rising has this place in their show, I would call it entertainment division, where it doesn't matter that, your record or how tough you really are.
Can you imagine the promotion for this fight? It'd be like the son of a famous football player versus the relative of the owner of the biggest soy sauce company. Right. It has some pretty funny promotional stuff with it.
Exactly. And, a lot of people don't forget this, but remember back in Dream days, they put Jose Canseco into the ring. So it's always been the same trend, right? In a way. The point is the Japanese corporation, they do practice in this discrimination treatment, I think, depends on what you do for your side gig.
Well, I mean, Rising and Deep have time and time again showed, like, if they think that you can make them money, they will use you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, remember that one announcer that Rising was using who was going through the whole scandal?
Right, yeah.
He got, like, fired from his agency, and so then Rising started using him. Who was that guy? He was, like, doing gig comedy shows and not telling his management company.
Right. Yeah, in Japan, it's funny. Like Yoshimoto is a big agency, but they take 90% out of talent's purse. I mean, the fee. So a lot of comedians, they sort of took a side gig, and never reported to the agency. And many of the side gig was the yakuza involved. So they ended up having a photo taken with the yakuzas and everything else, and that got them into the trouble. Yeah. So
next thing you know, they're at RIZIN doing some ring announcing work.
Right. Exactly. Right. So I mean, yeah. So it's very interesting. It's the Japanese culture, and it's the Japanese fight culture. But I'm telling you, this guy Uzakio is going to stay working for Fuji Television, and he's going to get this Miura fight.
So it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen too.
Miura needs something to like help repump up his popularity too.
But I have a feeling that Miura have a hard time winning this fight too. Uzakio is not. He's more solid. So
I have no idea how much Miura is actually training, but yeah,
it's okay. Right. So. All right. Anyways, I think we cover all the subject.
Yeah.
We
talked around.
Yeah.
Wait, I want to mention something. I had a note. Give me 1 second.
Okay. All right. Kodamai said, "I know that soy sauce." This has nothing to do with MMA.
I just thought it was kind of funny that this would never happen in the U.S. Did you see that RIZIN is hosting a women's only fan event?
Oh, really? They are?
Yeah. So they're trying to like gather together their women's fan base so that they can like network and become friends with each other, which UFC event it's got to be like 80-20 men to women. And like there's no way they'd be able to do a women's fan event.
But there are a lot of women fans. Oh, you know what? I wanted to touch this. Do you know that there's one place in Shinjuku got busted a couple of weeks ago, and they were specializing in clients to place the bet on online casino. Okay. You know how they're cracking on the online casino? You know what the name of that shop was?
What?
RIZIN. Exact same spell, exact same name. Oh my God! Stop giving MMA a bad name, right?
Yeah.
I mean, good thing they never mentioned anything about RIZIN, the MMA promotion, but it was the exact same name, exact same spelling. That's they all got busted,
I mean, when I was in Japan, I saw some shop that's called like the UFC, had like the same font. You see all those knockoffs and everything. But I just thought it was kind of a funny thing to see because someone messaged it to me asking if my wife was going, and I was just laughing, thinking that this would never happen in the U.S. Because if you followed K1, especially during the big boom, like of Takeru and those guys, women fans are what carried K1 for a long time.
Oh yeah. And hey, anybody who went to the Japanese big shows like from Pride Days to Dream to RIZIN, we all seen a lot of women in that show.
Yeah.
Or guys with the women, right? The couple.
RIZIN shows are probably 55-45 men to women. It's very close.
Yeah, I think so. And I think most of the guys who buys those expensive tickets, they have to bring the women to impress them. They'll have a little torch on the side, it's also, and like almost most of the girl looks like it comes from Hostess Bar.
They're all dressed very fancy.
Like a pyramid, So
a bunch of yamens, girlfriends in the crowd.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, let's come back and chat again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. And so I think we cover everything. And since he mentioned, I know that soy sauce, like I said, the Kikkoma is a name created by this fortune teller, and she got murdered in Hawaii, and his son both together. And the murder is a Japanese guy who got arrested. But he testified saying that, no, there are other murderers, but I'm not opening my mouth because I don't want to get in trouble. 20-some year later, he got murdered in jail this year. So I'm telling you, this is the
murderer was murdered in jail.
Yes. Wow. Yeah. But there were evidence that he was at this ABC store in Honolulu, which is far enough from this scene of a crime. It's almost impossible for him to take the body to this parking lot when he supposedly lit the fire. I mean, you go research on this Kikkoman, Kototome Fujita, which is the name of a fortune teller. Yeah.
It's very interesting.
It's a very interesting case. Yeah.
And I'll just respond to WMMAC Now's comment. That Koike woman you're speaking of is an incredibly famous actress in Japan. Who's still famous today. And she's married to a pro wrestler who I think fought Maha at a RIZIN show.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And you know, you've seen the election starting in Japan, and I saw Yuta Kubo doing speech all over the street, and Sakagira was up there, right?
I've seen lots of Twitter pictures of Genki Sudo and Kubo out there campaigning on the streets.
Yeah, but Genki is now in the middle of a little controversy too, and as a politician, he's still saying that he communicates with the people from space and stuff like that. So people, you know, I'm like, you know, like wishy.
Hey, man, people that believe in that vote too, I guess.
But here's what it is: Japanese politics is so bad. There's so many politicians. So if you go like a city level council, even you and I mean, I know you can't run. If I run for the council, I think I can win it because they just don't have enough people. So like I could see like Maha Sakura is also city council now, and I could see almost anybody from RIZIN with that kind of popularity, if they go there back home and run for city council, 90% I think they win it.
We just have to wait and see whatever Kubo does for his video that he gets to do.
The Kubo's is national election. That's a tough one, you know. If you go to city level, you know.
I was saying, I just can't wait to see what he does when he gets his free airtime and everything.
Oh, I know, with the Sada-chan, right? He's gonna do something weird. You know?
What's gonna be real weird?
Yeah.
I wonder if his monkey will show up.
All right, so so let's finish it up, and so I guess we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, thank you for listening, everybody, and I will be back in a couple of weeks.